That is it.
I don't know if you all heard that, but I forgot to hit the record button, so. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Tough night.
Do we need to start over? Just
No.
vote.
We're fine.
Okay, Mike. No, we cannot. I don't think I can do it twice, thanks. Are there any questions for Chairman Brightcoff? Okay, next item is the Zoning Board of Appeals report. Chairman Gratiter is here. Do you have anything to?
No, we have had no occasion to meet and we have nothing pending.
Okay,
So there's nothing going on.
pluses and minuses, right?
Well, yeah, a little bit of both.
Are there any questions for Chairman Gratiter, rather? Okay, next item of business is the police report.
The police activity is in the fourth packet. What's not in the packet is we had a burglary at the mobile station at Deerfield and Saunders. Officers responded to an alarm there at 3:06 a.m. and found that entry had been gained through a broken window. Anil, the owner, did respond and right away, and we were able to look at, my officers were able to look at security video. They showed multiple suspects made entry after arriving in a gray Jeep, and they removed cash and merchandise. They tried to move the ATM inside the station, but it was bolted down. They didn't have any success. That's what this crew, I believe the crew that's been doing it all over the Chicago area, that's what they're known for, is pulling up and robbing, stealing money from the ATMs. While the officers were at the scene, they were made aware of a burglary in progress at a gas station in Lincolnshire on Milwaukee, also involving a gray Jeep where a license plate was obtained. It was a stolen Jeep and fled southbound on Milwaukee, past our officer, who did not pursue. We don't pursue for nonviolent crimes, but there were multiple agencies that we made aware of everything right away. Everybody was tracking the car and watching its progress down Lake Hook and down the Edens. My officer was following, but not inside of the car, just trying to keep track of where the car was going. It ended up in Chicago in the 4700 block of Sacramento Avenue, where Chicago police and other units cornered the car, and 5 suspects got out and tried to flee. They were all taken into custody, and we transported them back here, brought them to Lincolnshire Police Department. We brought 3 of them back right away. One of them was charged with the UW possession of a firearm in Chicago, and they kept her, and the 5th suspect, who while trying to escape, accidentally shot himself in the foot with a gun that he was carrying. He wasn't hurt badly. We eventually brought him here also. We brought the car back here and we recovered 2 firearms, 2 Glock 9mm. One of them had actually been rigged to shoot fully automatic, like a machine gun. They both had extended magazines in them. It was good that nobody got shot at or hurt, on our side. They're in custody now. My detective is still working on the case and getting charges approved. We expect to charge 4 out of the 5 tonight. It's just been a long day. That's all I have.
Are there any questions for the chief? Okay. Okay, next. I really don't have anything else to say at this point. We're going to try to keep moving forward. One of the things we are going to take a look at, as I've spoken to you about before, is an organizational chart, and I've solicited a proposal from a group called GovTemps for a review of our positions, position descriptions, and so forth. Naturally, when I get that, if it's what I think we want to look at, I would bring that to the board. Past that, I echo the chief. It's just been a very long day. Are there any visitors here wishing to address the board? Are there any
There are
comments?
no
There are
emails.
no emails. Is there anybody on tonight that would like to address the board? Okay, hearing none and seeing none, we'll move on to new business. The first item of business is the approval of an amendment to the ordinance codifying provisions concerning the appointed position of the deputy village clerk. For family reasons, we have talked with the clerk, and she's going to be taking a short leave here, and we will reevaluate at the end of June. So we need to come to you to appoint a deputy village clerk. That will be my right-hand solid person, Katie Vaughn, who's there right now. She's wonderful with residents and is really she's got her work cut out for her. So having said that, Mr.
Let me-
Hubard, can you
Yeah.
lead us through this, please?
Maybe do better now. We actually appointed Katie to be deputy village clerk in December. And we already have an existing ordinance that defined the position of deputy village clerk, but the ordinance dates from some time ago. I'm thinking 2011. We used to do the ordinance numbers in a different order, but the ordinance was from 2011. And at that time, we just basically copied out the provisions from the municipal code for a deputy clerk. And the municipal code contemplated that the clerk itself would appoint and direct the activities of the deputy clerk, provided the board gave a budget to the clerk to do so. The reality here is that the village president is the one basically trying to assign duties to the village clerk in terms of updating records, consolidating some of our files, doing things like that. And so because we're a home rule community, we decided in talking with the mayor that we ought to have a couple of changes to the existing ordinance. One of them is in section B. So this exists, section 185 is an existing provision of the code, but subsection B, first sentence or two are there, but the last sentence isn't. It reads, the deputy village clerk shall receive such salary or other compensation for services as may be determined by the president and board of trustees. Currently, in the existing text, which is, we slipped in that language, the existing text behind this ordinance, so you could quickly refer to it for convenience. It says the deputy village clerk shall not receive any salary or other compensation for services. Back in 2011, I think we were looking at someone who might have been a recording secretary. Maybe that was, I don't even know if that was before your time, Jerry. But if we're asking Katie to take on additional duties, for example, being here tonight, I think the mayor would like to be able to come back to the board and discuss increasing the pay for this. In fact, this particular position can have its own stipend, or she may just decide to try and increase the compensation of the employee based on the additional services undertaken. We didn't want to have the prohibition in the ordinance that just said flat out there can't be any compensation paid to a deputy village clerk. This would give the board the opportunity to decide that at another date. The second change is in subsection D. We modified the language so instead of saying that the basically the deputy village clerk could only do a kind of a one-off thing per assignment when the regular clerk asked the deputy clerk to do a particular thing when the regular clerk wasn't available in the village hall. That's kind of what the standard language reads. This language, a little more broadly, just simply says the powers and duties of the deputy clerk shall be exercised in accordance with written direction given by the village president and the village clerk to the deputy clerk. The second part of that is carryover from what's existing, or whenever the corporate authorities have determined by resolution that the village clerk is unable or incapable right now of performing the duties. So we didn't want to have to create a situation where we had to have a formal resolution tonight finding the village clerk couldn't perform the duties. That's not quite the situation. We're really just looking for more flexibility in this language that will allow the village president and the clerk to assign tasks to the deputy clerk and have those tasks be performed really on an ongoing basis. That's the purpose of the suggested changes to the ordinance.
Trustee Hollander, please.
The village clerk is an elected position. Is there any issue that may come up just by appointing someone that reports to a different elected position, such as the mayor? Or is
Well, you
there a
notice that-
conflict?
Right. We drafted this to provide that the direction come from both the president and the clerk. So I've talked to our regular clerk about working on that kind of direction to provide. So I think we could fall within the parameters of that, the usual setup. We're a home rule community, so our powers are a little broader than normal. And if you look even on our village code, while the village clerk is an elected position, has certain defined duties, other duties of the village clerk are those specified by the board itself. So the village clerk is not totally independent even now of the board. I don't know if that answers all of your questions, Henry, but that's, I think we were aware of that issue and tried to design this in such a way that we wouldn't create dueling fiefdoms or anything like that.
Any other questions? Trustee Haber, you're head of the legal committee, and it looks like you might have a question. I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine with it. Seems perfectly fine. I'll move that, is this on waive first reading?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second to waive first reading?
Second,
Okay, discussion. Roll call, please.
Trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Dickon,
Aye.
trustee Eastman.
Aye.
Okay,
Motion passes.
okay, is there a motion for second reading and approval?
So moved.
Second,
Is there any further discussion on this ordinance? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Hollander,
aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Dickon,
Aye.
trustee Eastman,
Aye.
trustee Haber.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item of business is the approval for the police department to enter into a memo of understanding with Flock Group, granting the department access to cameras Flock has installed in area communities. Chief, would you like to discuss this a minute?
Sure. So many of our neighboring communities have installed flock safety cameras on some of their streets. And they found them very useful when a crime has been committed and there's a vague description or some description on a car but no license plate. They are sometimes able to get information on the car from the camera system by putting in the description. So it's a pretty useful system. I'm not asking that we purchase cameras yet. They do go for about $2,600 per camera. But for now, I would just like to be able to access some of our neighbors' cameras, which we can with their permission. But first, we have to enter into an MOU with Flock, just basically saying, and for those of you who read it, it basically just says that we're not going to abuse the system and use it for things that shouldn't be used for. There's no financial commitment involved. I'm just asking to be able to sign the MOU.
Any discussion? Trustee Clayton.
Somewhere in that memorandum of understanding, I forgot to note where exactly it is. It says that Flock retains the right to use the foregoing, meaning the data, for any purpose in Flock's sole discretion. I find that troubling. There's privacy issues, I think, here, and we don't have any control over what Flock is going to do with the readings on the cameras. Is that true?
Well, I don't know if Bruce wants to address that, but for our purposes, I'm not asking for cameras, so we're not going to have any data in the system. All I'm asking for is to sign to an MOU that if we were to have a crime in Riverwoods, we could put in a description of a car if we have some description and find out if it passed any of our neighboring cameras to try and get a license plate. So we're not going to have any cameras. I would expect that that'd be something that Bruce might want to look at if I were to come back and ask the board to purchase the camera or 1 or 2 cameras for the village at some point.
Attorney Hoover, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I think one of the other statements in the agreement is that they are still subject to all applicable federal and state laws. I think they're just trying to make it clear that they're running the system and we're not the ones that get to say what happens with the tape. Maybe they've had some issues with individual agencies in the past. And I think that's just part of the price of being able to go into a system that's shared and being maintained by various other agencies, that you don't get to be the one that takes possession of the data or do something like that. I mean, anything we get is more than we would have gotten without the data. We're subject to applicable laws. We can't misuse the data. And I can talk to their counsel as well, but I'm sure that they're made aware of the applicable restrictions on them as well. I think that's just a turf thing between Flock and the underlying agencies itself.
Are there any other questions? Do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Is there any other question, more discussion, concerns? Hearing none and seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Dickon,
Aye.
trustee Eastman,
Aye.
trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Last item of new business is the approval of a resolution adopting fund balance policies developed under section 1-15-1 of the village code. Trustee Clayton, would you like to lead us through this, please?
Well, our village attorney can give us some history with regard to this, but basically my involvement in this has come from the financial workshops that we've had and the carrying forward of our financial policies in such a way that it makes it clear to outside observers what the intended use of our funds is, what we anticipate the need for funds in the future is, and make it a little bit clearer with regard to how much of a safety net we really have with regard to unanticipated risks. And so we've laid out a series of guidelines for each one of our funds. The water and sewer funds guidelines balance target is unchanged from what the board has already established. In other words, $2 million for the water fund and $1 million for the sewer fund. With regard to the general fund, we did some research on what other standard practices of villages like ours is, as well as recommendations from government experts. The Civic Federation, for example, recommends that the minimum target for the general fund should be 6 months of operating expenses. Some villages only target 3 months of operating expenses. The target we're proposing here is actually much more conservative at 12 months of operating expenses. That also allows us to fully fund the capital fund, which our target there is 5 years of non-discretionary capital investment according to the capital plan. And so what we are recommending minimum cash in the capital fund of about $5 million, which means that at some point, if the board approves this, we'll make another transfer from the general fund into the capital fund of about $2 million. obviously the MFT fund is what it is, so we don't really have a target for that. And we didn't attempt to set any targets or anything for the TIF funds or the SSA funds because they are not relevant. So with that, if anyone has any questions.
If I can just jump in for a second. There was a resolution that I meant to have included with this. The resolution would adopt this policy, but also would indicate that it's replacing the old policy, which the board adopted in 2012, which at the time we called the replacement reserve policy. At that time, I think it set a target of 2 million in each of the sewer and water funds and didn't say anything about the other funds in the way that Mike has elaborated here. So this is an enhancement and an update to the older one, but depending on what the board wants to do, I would ask you to note in the motion that this is to replace the existing replacement reserve fund policy, or the next meeting I can have the resolution included in the packet, which lays it out. But this would be the current policy and would replace what we've had in the past. And I'm sorry for the omission. I didn't notice it was there, not there.
Well, I'm personally okay with going and trying to make a motion to update the 2000.
Replacement was called the replacement reserve policy.
Policy. So I'll move that we do that.
Is there a second?
Somebody.
This is just the way I understand it, it's just a matter of form. You don't have a
Second,
written resolution in front of, okay, second,
Second.
okay. Any further discussion on the policies? Any questions? Trustee Hollander.
This is probably a stupid question, but what happens if you can't make the $5 million in the capital fund? What are the consequences if for some reason we have 2 or 3 bad years in revenue? How does that work?
Well, we would do the same thing that we do when we have deficits in the general fund, which is we look for solutions to that problem, which may be an increase in the police tax so that we can move some funds from that. It could be other taxing alternatives, or we can choose to defer some of the capital investment that is in the plan for as long as we possibly can. Remembering that the capital investment that's in the capital plan is outside of the water and sewer capital investment. So those things are contained within the water and sewer funds. And we believe that what we do with that is, because those are enterprise funds, as we move forward, we change the rate. We can set rates differently depending on whether we are short or ahead of our targets.
Let me ask a follow-up question. If the capital fund is a deficit of $500,000, they only have $4.5 million. Does the general fund, is that required to make up the difference?
No. These are not, this is not a legal default. This would just, this is a policy. It's just a
Okay.
policy statement.
Yeah, there's no commitment. They're not restricted in the sense that they can't be used for anything else, or transfers cannot occur.
That's really my question. Thank you.
Trustee Haber, please.
So for the capital fund, how did we come up with the target reserve number of $2 million? I'm just wondering if that's something, that is related to anything else, the economic development, $2 million. Apparently, there's no answer to that question. So
Well, certainly, I don't know the answer to that question. I wasn't on the board in 2012, but
I'm just.
nor was I on the board when we set the targets for the water and sewer funds. Although those targets have proven to be relatively stable in terms of the overall cash balances and seemingly appropriate.
I might be able to, Yes.
Before you make that comment, Bruce, but I would just say maybe that question, is there a reason to talk about the reserves before we go ahead and again, call this motion? In other words, should we actually be bringing that before the board? Is it the time to revisit those numbers?
If I could add my 2 cents here. Capital reserves are not only for capital purchases, building maintenance. If we need a new roof, you've got to start putting money aside for those. Capital reserves would also include vehicles, large purchases. Economic development, when you talk about that, there's a possibility that as the village has in the past, we've purchased property. So it's really not, I don't think it's tied, in my understanding is that it's not tied to anything specific. It's an amount of money that we could call on should we choose to purchase property, should we choose to engage in a very large capital project. We didn't have those kinds of delineations, for example, when we started doing the building. We just had all this money out there. And so this is just a way to think about what we might do in the future and not to leave the money sitting in the general fund without purpose. And I think that's part of what we need to do is have some purpose, or at least earmark things for purposes that we envision could happen for the village in the future. Have I misstated anything, Trustee Clayton, or?
Oh, after thinking about it, Trustee Haber's question for a minute, basically, we've been operating with a ton of money in the general fund. And if I were a resident, I would ask the question, why do you need all that money in the general fund? What are you going to do with it? I think this clarifies the situation substantially with regard to, reflecting what we believe could be our longer run future requirements in different buckets.
If
Oh,
this may
please.
be helpful to the question. In the appropriation ordinance for a number of years, to give the board the flexibility to spend money for property acquisition or large-scale participation, say in a water project or something that would require significant village funds, more than was kept in the water fund, or wasn't anything to do with the enterprise funds, but for example, acquisition of property. We have a category that we used to call other financing uses. After we formed the Capital Projects Fund, we started appropriating to that fund. And typically, although it may not spring to your mind now, we've been appropriating $3-4 million every year under that rubric. In our appropriation ordinance, it's a balloon appropriation, so it looks like it's a very large number. But one of the reasons is that we've been appropriating under that category for a number of years so that the board had the opportunity to use those excess funds for capital type projects and acquisitions. So historically, I would say that we've probably been appropriating about $3-4 million. And I don't know if that, that doesn't necessarily answer the question about whether we should have further discussion about what the reserve level is, but I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that, from my perspective, when we do the appropriation ordinance, we've been earmarking some like that for some time now.
Trustee Hollander.
Yeah, I don't have a real problem with this now that it's been explained a little bit further, but I would like the opportunity to revisit this periodically.
Oh, yeah.
To take a look at the funds. I don't know whether you want to put this on that this needs to be, let's say, approved every 4 years or every 2 years, or report on what the recommendation is for the fund levels. But I don't think we ought to just put the number down there and then it's there until someone thinks otherwise. I would like to have the ability to reevaluate periodically, and I'll leave that to someone else to determine the time frame.
I think that sounds reasonable, and I think that sounds an important thing to do, is refreshing refreshing the board's memory, or, at least bringing it to everyone's attention on at least an annual basis. We like to look at our investment portfolio on an annual basis. There's no reason not to review the fund policies. As they can become stale, things can happen between now and then. I completely agree with you on the need for a review. Trustee Clayton, do you agree with that, or would you like to add?
Yes, no, I agree.
Is there any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor for approval of a
But I don't think there
resolution.
was a
Yes.
second, was there?
Yes, there was.
Yeah.
Trustee Haber seconded.
All right,
The
thank you.
Okay. Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Dickon,
Aye.
trustee Eastman,
Aye.
trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. There is no old business. We'll move to committee reports. We'll start with legal and police. Trustee Haber. You're
I
on.
don't really have anything other than I know that we're scheduling for another meeting to discuss the police contract. We're in negotiations, so that continues. If and when there's something more to report, I will do so.
Any questions for trustee Haber? Okay, communications, trustee Dickon.
Yeah, the website continues to be the big item on my agenda as it continues to evolve, and I hope it always will. Since the website was launched almost 2 weeks ago, we received quite a bit of feedback and some questions, and I wanted to address some of those so that things don't slip through the cracks. One of the questions was, what's happening with the Village Voice and why is there only one edition posted on the website? So to answer that, the printed version of the Village Voice will continue to be mailed out as in the years past. The content that's posted on the website is not meant to replace the Village Voice, only to complement it with the digital version and some more timely announcements. The Village Voice it's a very important part of the village's history. It deserves recognition on the website as well as in print. And at this time, all future digital versions of the publication will be posted on the website once they become available. I'm currently waiting to get some content from the Village Voice's editor in order to create a permanent space on the website that will house all previous archives of the publication. Also, a number of questions came up regarding forms and permit applications. So all forms and permit applications are in the process of being converted to fillable and submittable online forms. Many of the simpler ones have already been converted, and some of the more complex ones still exist as PDFs on the website. I've taken the appropriate village personnel through some basic training. We'll have some more in-depth training sessions in a few weeks when Vivian from the building department returns back into the office. And the goal of this conversion is not only to make life easier for the residents or contractors who are filling out these forms online. The website has a very nice reporting feature, and I do hope that that sometime in the near future we will be able to use the tools that we're paying for that come with the website to centralize record keeping and help streamline and simplify some of the internal workflows with the use of technology. And again, I wanted to thank everyone for their feedback, for their patience in answering my questions regarding all the content on the website, for your constant contributions to the page. And while the architecture of the website is still evolving, I plan to play an active role in its development. But once we finish laying, the foundation, all website updates and maintenance will be handled by the village personnel. And I'll step aside and I'll be on standby. I'm happy to support. And that's all I've got.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Trustee Jamerson is absent. Woodlands and Ecology, trustee Eastman.
The only thing I'm working on is the Village Hall and Flatwoods Campus use agreement or use policy. And I think we'll probably have something for the board by no later than the March 1st meeting. So that should be enough time for people that might be wanting to use the Flatwoods campus over the summer.
Any questions or comments? Suggestions? Okay, thank you. Land use and roads, trustee Hollander.
Yeah, I have bring the board up to date and probably would like some sense of the board when I finish it, and probably will have some questions. It really relates to the 37 acres along Milwaukee Avenue that we've talked about for years. 8 acres of which belong already in the village. And if you remember, this is a landfill. We've had various developers wanting to do something there, but the landfill presents a significant problem with a lot of the structures. In the last, I'd say 6-7 months, a group came forward, if everybody remembers, talking about a distribution center, whether it's the last mile or some type of, what's the term,
Docked, cross-docked.
cross-docking, where what goes in goes right out again. We've been working with the developers and getting a education on what these things do. Our initial concern was that if they don't work with us, they're going to go to Buffalo Grove and then we would have absolutely no control over the light and sound and any other issue if they went into the Buffalo Grove area. So one of the things we did was present to them a method by which they could be annexed to us, go through what I would call a fast track. We would find out what they wanted to do, and as long as it met with our requirements and needs, that they'd be able to do this in one step. That seemed to be attractive to them, and they came back to us. We've had a couple different discussions. The issue came up mainly recently with the traffic study. Now, from a village perspective, before I go to the traffic study, there were 2 major reasons that we would want them within Riverwoods. One was that we would have greater control. And the second was there was some revenue through TIF funds, but not a significant amount because they're not something we can get through taxing or anything. We were concerned about the impact of whatever was built there on the residents. Mainly 3 areas. One was light, sound, and traffic. We found out recently that the amount of traffic which is anticipated either through this cross-docking or the last mile did not meet the need to put in a signal at Picard Drive. That meant that there was going to be no ability to go south on Milwaukee as you exited the site. They were going to be able to enter going south across traffic, but they could not exit. They would have had 2 access points along Milwaukee, and then they wanted to use Deerfield Road as a source for exiting. That presented some problem because there was a significant amount of anticipated truck traffic, probably large, and I believe they were less than 1,000 trucks per day access. That number comes because that was what they gave as the anticipated number to try to get a signal light. I don't know how much would go through Deerfield Road. This caused us some concern. A third item came up that they were also looking at some type of light industry or factory. We're now at a crossroads as to what extent the village will entertain a significant amount of truck traffic on Deerfield Road. The majority will probably be turning left as they come out and going west, but there will be traffic going east on Deerfield. They came back with the idea that if they didn't have the Deerfield Road access, 2 things would occur. One, they'd go out on Milwaukee and then turn right onto Deerfield anyway. We would still have the same amount of traffic. But their feeling was that they did not have the Deerfield Road access, that this would not work for them. That was true for the cross-dock and last mile facility. I don't know how true that is, but it appears to be the prevailing position. It was at least my thinking that we still would want to control this if possible. And if we could control the traffic on Deerfield Road, it would be to our advantage to continue discussions with them. From my point of view, I think we need to know better what's going to be going there so that we can put in the guardrails that we need to protect ourselves. It seems a lot different that if you have a 400,000 square foot cross-dock facility with large trucks going in versus a factory or a light industry that has very few trucks going in and out. And since we don't know what's going to go there, I'm uncomfortable with moving forward with a broad ordinance that allows them to put whatever they want in there. So part of what we're looking for tonight, one was to bring you up to date on where this was going. And two, if there was a strong feeling about traffic going east on Deerfield Road, and there was some concern about it going west and getting backed up at the stoplight. So does anybody have any, did I leave anything out, Bruce or Chris? Or actually Lori was in on this.
No. I think what we heard was a bit of a sea change. Up to last week when we first heard this, I think the village thought that a distribution center one way or another could get built on the site. But the developer's own traffic engineer, and then we confirmed with Dan Brinkman at Gewalt Hamilton on Monday, because these facilities, the traffic comes in a couple of bunches when the employees arrive. Maybe the large trucks come throughout the day at off-peak hours, but basically, under a number of scenarios, these kinds of distribution facilities, at least at this size, don't meet the special warrant requirements that you need to put a signal on Milwaukee Avenue, which is a special kind of strategic regional artery. I think it's called an SRA. Probably one of the engineers will nod if I have that right. And IDOT won't just let you put a traffic signal in until you meet those requirements. I think in retrospect, it's a little surprising that the developer team could have gotten as far as they did talking about this without nailing down whether they could get a traffic signal on Milwaukee. With these kinds of trucks and things, obviously, you can't turn out of the site across 3 lanes of traffic. And I'm not even sure turning in is going to be that easily accomplished. So without a traffic light, if you can imagine these large trucks. So as we were talking about this, sort of the idea was, well, the scenario has changed somewhat now. The village is not perhaps stuck with a large warehouse distribution facility with this kind of traffic pattern, even though it could be one of 2 or 3 types. But as Henry was saying, on the other hand, it's still a difficult site to develop. It could still be developed for some kind of light manufacturing, perhaps, even if not a distribution center. It still might be possible with enough information to know that the impact on Deerfield Road is not that substantial. Even with light manufacturing, that the access off Milwaukee may be sufficient for a lot of purposes, I think, as Henry was saying. We still have the opportunity to offer TIF assistance, but I think really what we were reflecting on is, so the board knew this, and so that we weren't facilitating too much a use that the board wasn't supportive of. It's a sort of a question of what is the right degree of encouragement? What are the types of uses that we should encourage there that we, and what Dan Brinkman said yesterday, Chris was on the call with me, was each type of distribution use has a very, very particular type of traffic pattern. What the developer asked us to do was to consider a broad approval that would allow them to choose and pick among 2 or 3 types of users once they knew what the user was. I think what we were encouraged yesterday in my conversation to do was nail down the user so we knew precisely what the pattern was, so that we could then evaluate its real impact on us and adjust for it. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Trustee Haber.
So I think that in the absence of an intergovernmental agreement with Buffalo Grove, which says that, no one's going to develop this site without some kind of approval or consent of the other governmental group, I think we are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I think number one, if we can possibly discuss an intergovernmental agreement, and I think we probably have in the past, and it's never really panned out, but if we can renew those discussions, I think that's one thing. But if we can't renew those discussions, I think then we have to be flexible with the site, but very, very cautious about traffic down Deerfield Road. I think if you're going to have a site that's going to have that number of trucks potentially every day, trying to get to the tollway, or get, to the east side of the suburbs and stuff. I think we're gonna have a lot of screaming neighbors, and at that point, it almost might be better to let it happen if Buffalo Grove does it, so that at least we didn't facilitate it unless we thought that we had some control over some part of it to make it a little bit better.
Well,
The-
just remember, we control access to Deerfield Road. So
Yeah.
the only way they're going to have that access is if the village says yes to this.
It's,
Yeah, but they could always make the right turn to Milwaukee Avenue, and that's the thing.
here's what, I'm gonna, a quote from this meeting. The
Mhm.
developer said that without Deerfield Road access, he feels the project is dead.
Yeah, well, then it might be dead.
That was, so again, doesn't, he says it one, what he says, I'm not so sure.
My impression
Right.
was that related to the last mile facility and cross docking.
Yes,
If there is a third or fourth other type of client that he can put there, then I think we can have discussions again. I think he was referring only to those two types of facilities.
what I would also ask the trustees to recall is that if you come out of the 37 acres across R8 and that stoplight that's across from Federal Life, please remember that those trucks, that traffic will be going right next to Elevate Care, and headlights will be going into Lexington Homes. So just, keep that vision in your mind about this. Trustee Clayton, I think you had your hand up and I cut in.
I just have a question. Are there weight limits on Deerfield Road? And if there are, what kind of trucks does that preclude?
So,
Well, I know who would normally answer that question. I don't want to put our engineers isn't the weight limit on Deerfield Road 6 tons?
no, weight limit on Deerfield Road is the maximum, which I think is 88,000 pounds. I don't remember off the top of my head. So it would have to be a large semi that's overfill for it to be overweight.
Thank you.
So fair size. I mean-
Yes,
Okay. Trustee Hollander, can you repeat what we're looking for from the board, please?
Yeah. First, I said to the board that that a large amount of truck traffic along Deerfield Road is not, we would rather let Buffalo Grove deal with this than have us support it. That was what I heard from Trustee Haber. And to a greater extent, that was the thinking that we had among ourselves as well. Second, if we can find a way to develop the land, which does give us some benefits, without a significant amount of truck traffic along Deerfield Road, that would be beneficial to us. We would, of course, have to know what was going to be going in there and then come back. Are those two statements an accurate reflection of what the board thinks?
It is for me.
Trustee Eastman?
I guess I would say, do we have a sense for if we let this opportunity pass, what new opportunities, may be there to develop it? I mean, do we have a good sense that there's going to be some alternative, or is this sort of, if we let this pass by, is this going to be the last chance to really develop it for a while, despite all the issues with the traffic?
If you use historical action as precedent, this is a very difficult place to develop.
Right.
In
That's
my,
that's what I'm grappling with is, despite all the issues, is it likely gonna just sit for a long time if we pass on this?
I do have one new piece of information that I just learned yesterday and haven't really been able to digest yet. But after many years, the site has received a no further remediation letter from the state EPA. I just got that. They just forwarded it to me yesterday. And I just haven't really been able, I did have our our lawyer consultant on environmental matters take a look at it, and we talked briefly today. But essentially, the state is saying as long as they maintain that 3-foot clay cap in good shape, they have, maybe 4 or 5 feet of regular soil fill of some sort on top of it. No further action has to be taken. In other words, they've determined that there's no significant migration off-site, that the leachate isn't a problem, that the methane, if it's there, can be dealt with, so that to get to, I'm giving you just a very high-level overview, but to get to the NFR letter on the site, which was a quite extensive NFR letter, is a good thing for the site. And so historically, this wasn't in place. It was always something that the owner was working on, but it wasn't in place. It's now there. Will that make the site more developable by a multifamily developer again? I don't know. But it certainly means that one of the biggest obstacles that has ever existed for the site has been lifted. And it seemed to me that what was driving the move to industrial was that it's just the hottest market right now in real estate. Although we had some real estate developers who, for whatever reason, looked at the site and thought it was too hard to develop. But that's not to say that somebody later on couldn't look at it and think of a combination of different types of development.
Was a secondary benefit, which I didn't mention, which is theoretical, and that is, if this did come into Riverwoods, it would give us the ability to access property across Milwaukee, such as the Speedway and River Run, for further annexation or in a cooperative way, which right now we don't have easy access to. And I know Trustee Clayton has been interested in extending our ability to bring in some other business. So that was a secondary benefit if this did come into Riverwoods.
Trustee Clayton.
I'm trying to understand the developer's logic or the logic of this. It seems to me that if we let this go to Buffalo Grove, they're not going to have Deerfield Road access. So if the project is dead without Deerfield Road access, then going to Buffalo Grove, it doesn't get them anything, because they're still not going to have Deerfield Road access. From our point of view, if it comes into the village, we at least get control over the noise and the light, or some degree of control over the noise and the light and so on. And we're going to get the traffic on Deerfield Road if the project goes forward one way or another. It's a question of where they make the right turn, whether they make the right turn at Milwaukee or whether they make the right turn at the future intersection next to Federal Life. So in general, I mean, I could kind of argue both sides of this to some degree. We should, if we let it go to Buffalo Grove, they're not going to have Deerfield Road access. So then they're saying the project won't go forward. So then the project won't go forward and we haven't lost anything. If the project will go forward, regardless of Deerfield Road access, then I think we should pursue it.
Well, I don't think from what they said and from what our traffic people have said, a type of distribution facility that's being built today, a common type, wouldn't generate warrants that would allow for a traffic signal at Picara, on Milwaukee, which would be very difficult for a lot of these distribution facilities to make sense of if they didn't have a traffic signal there. So maybe the choice is we say no to Deerfield Road and there's no distribution facility and this developer goes away, or we say we don't think a distribution facility with access to Deerfield Road is what we want, but some other type of use we could look at, even if it did have access to Deerfield Road, because it might be something we could manage more effectively. That might be more the A-B choice.
My understanding was that they were asking for a lot of flexibility. They wanted flexibility and access, which were the two key words in the discussion. And flexibility in terms of, gosh, if we can't have a distribution center, a last mile kind of thing. You know, terms like manufacturing, light manufacturing were part of that discussion. So they're looking for flexibility in zoning, broad flexibility in zoning. And so it becomes a little difficult when they come in with one, you know, we're focused in one direction and they're looking for flexibility. So just in case they don't have a client that is a distribution center that can function in that way, then they can go out and look for somebody else. There's a lot of, it's just a lot of interesting timing. Why didn't they know about traffic before they came with the distribution center? What do you mean by manufacturing? What have you got in mind? Well, we don't know. So I think, you know, that's kind of the conundrum we're in. Access, what kind of access? You know, to Deerfield Road, meaning what kind of trucks, what kind of traffic do you expect, what kind of volume? Well, we don't know. Well, is it going to be a distribution center? Is it going to be light manufacturing? Well, we don't know. So it's kind of a difficult discussion. I think it's a difficult discussion.
I don't think we ought to, I think that we need to know what's going in there before we determine what we want to do with it. I think it's up to them to tell us what they're looking at, and then we can respond. If the board feels that heavy traffic on Deerfield Road is a no-go. If no one cares about the traffic on Deerfield Road, this is easy. But if we do care, then I think we have to know what's going in there before we go forward.
So the question is, do we have the discussion with them at the Plan Commission? Or do we say, you know, we really don't want to go forward with this parallel annexation zoning issue? We need to know what you want zoning wise before, because we've got parallel paths going on here.
The advice that we have is that we can't plan for the traffic impact unless we know the use.
Yes. I don't think there's any problem with light and sound, and that we, whatever goes in there, we can do what we can do to ameliorate it. And there are other things that Chairman Brightcroft brought up that they were interested in as well, with timing and things, but it's the traffic. So I agree with Bruce that until we know what's going in there, we really can't address it.
Chairman Brightcroft, do you have anything to add to this, please?
No, I think it's been well covered. I think let's not discount the impact that it will have on residents and their fury. So please take that into account seriously, because I think people would be very, very upset, depending on what the traffic is going east. And I think also going west, there will be a problem at the lights with those large semis making turns. We're already concerned about backing up, even with the renovations of the road. These big trucks are going to back up. So I think the traffic is a big, big issue for the residents.
Is there a consensus by the board that we go forward with the meeting with the Plan Commission with this group? Hear
Yes.
more about what they're planning.
Yes, on my account.
I would not put this before the Plan Commission until we know what they want to do.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Yeah, I think what I'm sort of hearing is that we'd like to say to them that we are willing to still listen to ideas and work with them. The distribution idea involving access to Deerfield Road based on a last mile or a cross-dock facility probably is not going to work because of the amount of traffic that would come onto Deerfield Road unless they can show us otherwise. But some other use that doesn't have such a heavy dependence on Deerfield Road that we could still assist them with is something we're interested in helping them accomplish. I mean,
But we want them to have a clear idea of what is going to be
Right.
Is that, did I misstate anything, trustees?
All right, that's the end of my report.
Are there any other questions?
Well,
Trustee Dickon?
I have a comment. I might be wrong, but it's my understanding that the large trucks that are used for the final mile deliveries usually travel at night. So in terms of traffic, is it really going to impact traffic that takes place during the day? So if we could clarify the hours that these vehicles would be driven, that might help, guide the discussion a little bit. That's all I have.
Okay, is there anything else? Okay, finance and economic development. Trustee Clayton, did you have anything more for us tonight?
Just an update on the BSNA contract, which is the contract for the replacement of the assist system. We're down to one item, which is the amount of notice we have to, cancellation notice we have to give on training. Hopefully, the village attorney and their attorney can work that out really quickly, so we'll be moving forward with that. The water meter situation is, of course, going to be a little bit complicated at this point. We're going to need the assistance, obviously, of Gewalt Hamilton in understanding how this is going to go forward. Right now, it looks like we have 785 meters that are registered and updated. We have 222 meters that are not yet installed. And we have about 32 or so where there's errors that need to be resolved. So we're working through that. We've issued all the 1099s. We've got the auditors in, and we're starting on the year-end closing, and we'll re-meet with the auditors in March. And that's it.
Any questions? Any questions for Trustee Clayton? Okay, no reason tonight to go into executive session. Are there any other comments from the board? Something we might have missed? Anything you want to add to the discussion that wasn't on the agenda?
I'd like to take this opportunity to wish Henry Hollander a very happy birthday, and also Mike Clayton on February 5th. So we really appreciate all you do for the village. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for ending on a bright note. Thank you, Katie. And welcome aboard, by the way.
Thank you.
Is there anything else from anyone? Okay, the next time and date for the meeting is February 15th at 7:30. It will be virtual. And do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second? Oh, no, I can't second. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm just getting a little anxious here, you know. All right. Any questions, any comments, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Eastman,
Aye.
trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Dickon.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Good night, and thank you to all of you. And I will send out information on the services for Pat.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.